Let's talk about some of the winning strategies in chess. So very often the first thing you want to do, you want to identify if the position that is in front of you, is it a strategic position or is it a tactical position? Because your choices will depend on what you think. So what will be a strategical position? For example, here, I don't see any immediate tactics here. And if you have studied this particular opening, you see that the pawn structure here, b2, c3, d4, it's like an arrow. It shows you that you have to play towards the king side. So that's what we are going to do. So we are going to go for a king side attack. Also, the bishop on d3 is a key element to do something here. So we're going to play knight e5. The point is we occupy the e5 square with the idea is that after knight e5, we want to take the d pawn, push with the knight on f6 so that the defense for black is a bit more difficult to carry out. So black goes queen c7, bring another knight to the attack. We bring more pieces to the attack, bishop g5, bishop b7. Now we can trade off pair of knights so that we can put another knight on e5. And what we're doing, we're slowly getting more pieces for a potential king side attack and keep our eyes open. So black in this game played rook c8. We played rook d1. This also gives you ideas like bishop b1, rook d3, rook g3, or rook h3. We're just trying to do something here. We're looking for some sign of a weakness in our opponent's defense. And now black faltered. Black went here, clearly missing white's intentions, and there comes the shot. Now this strategical position becomes tactical. Knight f7, disrupting defenses, queen e6, king goes here, and bishop takes on h7. And just like that, black is winning. The point is we generate a lot of threats. So if black takes it, bishop takes on e7, black's position is collapsing. Now a tactical position would be this, where instead of slow developing moves, we can immediately charge forward. So black has played out some sort of a Scandinavian defense, but his bishop at h5 is a bit strange, so we can immediately charge forward. As you can also see, the bishop on d2 is indirectly hitting the queen on a5, so all we need to do is jump in the knight and hit the queen, and it works really well if you can combine these ideas together. So we are going to start with g4. We are going to start with f4. Our idea is to trap the bishop. So black plays h6, we play f5, we push away the bishop all the way to h7, and now we play knight b5. Now you see we suddenly have a big threat of playing knight e6, knight f7, and winning material, which, by the way, immediately was not working because the bishop on h5 or g6 protects the pawn on f7. So if you saw knight b5, knight e6 initially, it's really great, but you identified that the bishop on h5 takes care of the fork, so you push away the bishop first away, and only then you execute the knight b5 and knight e6 idea. There's one thing that I'm going to reveal you, a small secret. Maybe you already know it, maybe you don't know it. If you know it, you heard it from me. When you don't know what to do, and I imagine many players, they have it in this situation. There are moments when they just don't know what to do. You know, I just develop the pieces, I play at the opening, and now what? Now what? What I'm supposed to do? There's no attack. What am I supposed to do? So when you're in such a situation, you can always ask yourself, how can I improve my position? Try to improve your worst piece. It's always going to work. So here in this position, you see the knight on h3 is not doing anything, so we don't have a direct attack. The center is pretty unclear, the queen side is pretty locked at the moment, so we start by improving our pieces. How about giving a new role for the knight on h3? You can do it. You can play knight g1, knight f3, bring the knight to e5. So let's say black goes here, and now you can already play knight e5 immediately, but now first we can improve the queenside knight as well, because we just spotted some very nice squares that black has weakened at the queenside. Now put the knight on e5. This is a threat. Knight g6. This knight is also incoming, and it probably is going to lead to the point where black is going to lose something. Let me show you more examples. So here we have this position. Now black is probably slightly worse because he has a terrible bishop on b7. The queen on c8 is not doing anything. This knight on e6, by the way, is pretty good. It's staring at this d4 square. And still, it's not so clear. How do we make progress? And I remember what I said. When you don't know what to do, you can always improve your pieces. Improve your worst piece. So which one is it? I mean, rook at a1? You could play rook c1. What is the rook doing on c1? The queen on c2? You could play queen e2. What does the queen do on e2? But when you think about the position more closely, you realize, wait, actually it's the last square bishop. It doesn't do anything. It's looking at the pawn on e4. So we can improve it by playing h4. Now the point is, we give the bishop a new diagonal. Suddenly this bishop is looking really active and doing much more work than on g2. Another example is here. So black is simply better after the opening. Whatever white is doing in the opening phase, it was wrong. Now we're thinking, how to improve my pieces? I don't know what to do. So which piece can be improved? And looking at the position, knight on f6 looks good, the bishop on e7 looks good, queen on b6 is pretty decent. Yeah, this rook on f8 doesn't do anything. How do we bring it in the game? I could play rook d8. But does it really feel like an improvement? Not quite. I mean, maybe slightly. But one thing you know about rooks is that they're really well positioned on open files. So we already control one open file with rook on c8. So one rook at the c file, an open file is good. You know what's better? Two rooks. So you play rook c7, you play rook c8. This is how it goes. So it's not always about a lot of tactical shots or direct attack to the king. Very often, one of the key elements of becoming a better player is to understand which piece has to be traded and why. So here we have a choice. We can play bishop h6. So by the way, this is a very common mistake, unfortunately, for many players. They tend to play bishop h6 like automatically. Why? Because they're weakening the king. This might be the case, but then again, think about what's going to be your follow-up to expose the weakened black king. Do you have an attack? I don't see it. Okay, somebody might say, no, I have an attack. I'm going to play f4. You know, I have an attack. I'm not so sure, actually. This is like a very serious attack. Obviously, white is slightly better, but it feels that you could have done more. And when you think about the piece trade, you see actually this bishop on g7 is pretty bad. And what makes a good piece and a bad piece? A good piece controls many squares. A bad piece controls nothing. Just accept the square basically it's standing on. So that's why bishop h6 here is not a good move. But we notice there's a very nice potential outpost on d5 for this knight. The problem is it's contested by the knight on f6. So the logical outcome is we play bishop g5. We want to take on f6 and now anchor the knight on d5. And now this knight on d5 cannot be contested by the pawns or the queen or the bishop or the rooks. So simply white is much better and the knight on d5 dominates the bishop on f6. Another example how to trade the pieces is this position right after the opening. So here white played knight e5, which is a great outpost. Our bishop on f6 is bad, so we wouldn't really mind to trade it for the bishop on c1, because you see the bishop on f6 was staring at the pawns here, so we traded. White went here. Very often when it comes to the trades, it's all about who is going to trade it. Is it going to be you? Or is it going to be your opponent? There's no need to be stubborn, but I think with every single trade, you want to make sure that you are making trades that favor you. Right? For example, after bishop takes on c1, which is probably a decent move, you want to make sure that you're not helping actually white. So we want to give white an opportunity to take on g5. Why? Because it's going to activate our queen. So here we start with bishop e6 first. White plays bishop e2. Now we simply realize that white is not going to take on g5. Okay, fine. I wanted to trade the bishops in the first place. So we traded here. And now the question is, do we take on d5 with a bishop or we play knight e7? Now, I think that after bishop takes on d5, white simply has the stronger bishop than the knight. Why can I tell that? Because this knight has no good squares. I can't possibly imagine a really great square for the knight. Maybe try to put it on g6, but white's just going to play g3. This bishop would easily make it to d1 on b3, and then maybe to d5. So it feels that this bishop might become really a stronger piece. And that's why here we don't want to take on d5, but we're going to play knight e7 to trade off our worst piece, which is the knight on c6 against a very strong knight on d5. So if white takes it, here we play rook d8, we are about to push d5, we're doing great. One thing I'm sure you have heard before, why pawns are the soul of chess? Because pawns are the least valuable pieces that you have, and you should learn to use them to generate targets. It's very difficult to generate targets with your pieces if your opponent is not creating for you. So you use the pawns to generate the targets, like in this example, we are playing d5 to do what? To gain space advantage. So there's also, of course, a threat to play d6, but actual idea is to gain space, and space advantage is a huge topic in chess. Now here black responded e takes, c takes, black responded to the threat of d6. Now you see his bishop on e7 is pretty bad. We have taken away the c6 square for the knight, and after rook e8, bishop e2, white simply enjoys the better game. So you might argue, why? Why all of this? Why spend the tempi for d5? Why do not we play like bishop e3 immediately? Because then black is going to play d5, and you see his knight is heading to c6, and his bishop is more active. So compared to this position, you see, his bishop now is pretty locked, and the knight cannot go to c6. Quite the difference. Another example, why pawns are the soul of chess, is that we could use them to expose our opponent's king's defenses. So this is the typical idea in the Sicilian Dragon. We sacrifice the h-pawn to open up the h-file to get to the king. Now very often the players with black, they accept the pawns without asking any questions. So we exchange the bishops, king g7, we push back the knight, knight f6, and now the attack continues. Check here, and if we formulate the key ideas to get to the pawn on h7, but it's protected by the knight, how do we get to the h7 square? We have to remove the knight. So you play knight e5 and that's it. The knight is gone. Queen h7 is inevitable. Checkmate on the board. Another example about the pawn play is, you see, we are really interested to generate us a situation where we have a significant space advantage. And by the way, the knight on c5 is so annoying. Yeah, this is such an annoying knight, pressing the pawn on e4. I really can't move this knight to bring the bishop in the game, because then the pawn on e4 is lost. So I want this knight to be gone. How do we do it? If you're going to start with a3, the obvious idea to play b4, black can play a4, fixing this knight on c5. And if you play b4, have you heard of this term called en passant? Takes, knight b3, and even knight e7. So white simply has a worse pawn structure. We got to the idea of bishop e3, but now this pawn on a3 is going to be an eternal target. So the devil obviously is in the details. So we start with a careful move b3. Make sure that black cannot play a4. Now we play a3. And then we play b4. Push away the annoying knight and secure ourselves a better possession. So if here after a3 black plays a4, b4, there's no en passant on b3 obviously, because the b pawn moved only for one square. And one more final position of the pawn play is here. We can use our pawns to push back our opponent's pieces. So here white plays bishop f4. It feels that white is, nicely controlling some of the central squares. And if there's going to be d6, white's going to play knight c6. And if we don't like the knight c6 idea, we can take it away by playing knight a5. Also, by the way, it hits the pawn on c4. So let's say white goes here, protects the pawn on c4. We play d6, push away the knight. You see, it cannot go to c6 anymore. When white goes back, we improve the pieces, meaning here the docks with bishop. We improve the pieces, we play queen e7, and again, we are thinking about our pawn play, we're thinking about generating targets in the center, and by the way, it comes together with a tactical trick to deliver a fork. So white goes here, we play e5, and black takes over the game. One more thing it's going to allow you to become a better player is to think about ways to generate threats. So creating threats is a skill. So, okay, sometimes what happens at a starting level is that you just notice, oh wait, my opponent has blundered the rook, let me take it. Yeah, but this was not your doing, it was the opponent. So an actual skill is the ability that you generate these threats. So here we have this position from the Colossus system. White just played e4, and now we are generating threats. For example, if black plays b4, we play e5, and we are starting a king set attack. Again, you see this pawn chain we have here. It shows us the direction we're going for a king set attack. So we are going to continue rook e1, knight f1, knight g3, h4, h5, knight g5, whatever. Everything just flies towards the black king. So after e4, most likely black has to take it. Knight takes on e4. You can't take on e4. We have generated threats. That's a double attack. Checkmate on h7, the knight on c6. So bishop b7 has to be played. And now we move on. Knight g5, you see we had two beautiful bishops here looking at the pawn on h7. The threat is knight f6 and knight h7. So it feels that black has to respond with h6. We continue with knight f6. Execute the same idea, building a very powerful battery of the queen and the bishop. So you could take the knight on g5, that's a mate. g6, and now comes the killing blow. Knight takes on e6, completely demolishing our opponent's defenses. F takes, queen g6 with a killing attack. So what's incoming here is bishop h6, queen h7, and everything just is destroyed. One more example, how to create threats, is obviously push forward everything towards your king. So here we are going to play knight c3. And black faces a very unpleasant question. How to deal with the d5 move. Because remember, I already showed you d5 is a pretty annoying idea. For example, now we play d5, lock the bishop, block the knight. And if black decides to play something like knight a6, d6, bishop a6, and black is simply losing the bishop on d6. That's it. He can't do it. Also, he probably can't play b6 himself because, oh my goodness, look at this knight on d4. White is clearly dominating the position here. A wonderful coordination of the pieces. The pawn on d5 cannot be taken due to tactical problems. The king is weak for black. So, what do? Obviously, it makes sense for black to block the d pawn by playing d5. But now comes c takes, knight e5, and knight e5. So we already are threatening some very annoying checks like bishop b5 or queen a4, and this check is pretty difficult to meet. So it seems that black has to run away with a short castle. And now comes queen g4. So we have enough pieces to go for a king set attack. The knight on e5, queen on g4, knight on c3, bishop here on c1. Literally every single piece that we have is going for an attack. Let's just show me a single line. Like here, here, and queen e4. So that's a mate. g6, you collect exchange, and then you win the game. So here, black decided in this game to defend with knight f6, queen h4, there's some threats on the pawn, knight c6, bishop g5, now we're threatening to take on f6, take on h7 with a mate on the board, h6, just sacrifice on h6, completely expose the king, and after g6, there comes the deflection move. Actually, if you want to think about this position for a moment, you can do it. If you found bishop a6, that's beyond impressive, you know. Because now the point is we're deflecting the bishop from b7 to defending the knight on c6. If black takes it, knight c6, knight e7, bishop f6, white just wins in crushing fashion. A stunning move. And one more final example to look at how, I think this is what we do from the black's perspective. how we can generate threats from the black's perspective is we use the pieces that we have. Again, push everything we have towards the white king. So we play knight a5, we generate threats. The knight b3 is a fork, knight on c2, knight on c4 might be a problem at some point. So rook b1, rook h6. Here, we are already threatening with some very big threats like queen g5 or queen h4, and it's very easy for white to misplay this. For example, h3. Yeah, stopping, I suppose, queen h4, but now we expose the king. Check, and queen h4. That's it. So white cannot protect the pawn on h3. Two heavy pieces easily take care of the weak white king. And g3 actually feels a very nice refutation. You feel that there's something wrong with this long diagonal. You're probably right. Now white can play, black can play this very beautifully looking queen h4. The point is queen h2 is there, and g takes on h4 is the check, and a mate on the board. So this is how you generate threats. So that's it. Those are the winning strategies that ultimately are going to allow you to become a better player. Keep studying chess, and have fun.